Marcus Ely here for Status Quo. I'm here with Edie Hernandez. And you are the executive director of Poder in Arizona. This is our Poder in Action. And you guys put on the event that I'm here in town for tonight. Um, can you talk a little bit about why you felt like this event was necessary to have tonight?
Yeah, definitely. We have been in Phoenix experiencing a such a high level of police violence, particularly around Phoenix, which is the fifth largest city in the country, and it is the largest city right in this state. And just the level of violence and the level of pain and trauma in every interaction. We have heard story after story after story, Facebook post, the Ames family, Baco, just so many stories that it was very clear that for people of color in Arizona, for immigrants in Arizona, for young people, that calling the police is such a huge threat and sometimes a death sentence that we need to start thinking about what are alternatives to calling the police and how do we keep each other safe. And so that was what we hope to do today is to start planting those seeds that we need to create our community safety because this idea of, public safety is just not working.
Um, so something I've been asking every one of y'all that I've talked to tonight has been you all are basically in the city in Phoenix. You're on the front lines of the issues when we talk about police brutality with 44 incidents of police shootings in 2018. How does that shape you guys' activism and your organizing out here?
Yeah, Phoenix is not seen like police violence as we've seen it increase. It wasn't a city where you would think, oh, that's a city where police violence is happening and police brutality. And so a lot of our work has been to really show the level of violence that is happening. The 44 shootings last year was such a horrible number to think of, but we also have exposed, cases of women who've been sexually assaulted or sexually abused by this department, people that have been harassed by this department, people who've been beaten by this department. And so a lot of our work is that it's how do we tell the stories of our people, especially because so often they are not believed. And then we have a city and a leadership and a mayor and a police chief that keep saying that there's no problem. And so our work is to show that there is a problem, show a face to the people that are being hurt, which is our community in Phoenix. And yeah, it shapes everything we do, right? So after mob shootings, for example, we do banner drops in the corners or the cross streets where people were shot and killed, and we say, Phoenix police shot someone here, because part of this visibilizing what's happening. So doing that, supporting the families that have experienced trauma, creating events like this where we're shifting the conversation around police interactions. So these are all the ways that we play a role, and in making sure that this is an issue that is critical in Arizona, that is critical to elections, and that it's front and center.
Um, Now, also, another thing that kind of gets me with trying to when talking about police brutality and having this debate on whether we need reforms, whether we don't need reforms or whatnot, is we don't even have the stats. I was talking to I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he did data for you guys. And like files for Michael, yes, he files Freedom of Information Act requests for you guys, and he was telling me that he oftentimes he just can't get the information because either A, it doesn't exist, or B, they just pretend it doesn't exist and don't want to give it to him. And it's like, how are you supposed to react to these situations when you don't even have a data collection on that? So I was just wondering, like, what type of challenges does that pose for you guys when you're out here trying to protect your community members and deal with this police force that's enacting all this violence on y'all, and you don't even have records of all the violence of everything that they're doing?
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things, right? It's like proving it. Like we're bringing the stories, the cases are there, but they say, well, our records don't show this. Our records don't show that this is happening. Well, partly because you're not keeping records, right? We just had, like, for example, few horrible cases. One of them that they did, the Phoenix Police Department did an illegal cavity search to a woman. They searched, they put their hands in her body, inside her. Um, there was an arrest. They detained her for hours. There's no police report.
And on top of there being no police report, the woman that this happened to, I don't want to say her name, but the the woman that this happened to, because it was a woman, they had to have a female police officer come and do the cavity search, and the female police officer got fired, but the men who harassed her and who called for the called for the cavity search, nothing happened to them. They're fine and dandy, and this is the way patriarchy works, right? It penalizes even the women collaborators who collab, like in this situation, wouldn't have been no cavity search, wouldn't have been nobody to be fired if she doesn't collaborate with them, and then they penalize her.
Yes, they penalized her only. Even she was called after the stop was made. After they searched the car, they didn't find anything. They were looking for drugs, right? They said that that's what they were looking for. Searched the car, didn't find anything. Two officers searched, didn't find anything. They brought a canine, didn't find anything. They brought a female police officer to do, just body search, they didn't find anything. Then they took her and arrested her, her, and they made this officer, yes, this female officer, do the cavity search. Didn't find anything. No police report is done or written. The woman that's now come out and said her story. Her name is Erica Reynolds, and I think it's really important to talk about this, right? It's a black woman. Um, they did this to her. They let her go because they didn't find anything. She went to a hospital, right? And she said, I think I was raped by the Phoenix Police Department. And now when we look at it, we want consequences for all these officers. The only one that they're saying that's going to have consequences is this one female officer that was one of the last people. We think that they are definitely part of this, but this is, again, is the brotherhood, the patriarchy within the men in blue and within this department is very clear through that case as well.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that has repeatedly come up over and over again tonight, and just listening to folks talk and tell their stories, and talking about how to deal with the police and when dealing with the police, what to do and what not to do, has been the angle of folks being undocumented and not wanting to call the police at all. For even when you need them. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been in that and how that led to you doing this?
Yeah, no, being previously undocumented, the one time that I felt I needed to call the police after there was a break-in into my house, when I was about 19, was my first year living on my own. The first question I got when I called the police was asking me for an ID. As being an undocumented person at the time, I had no ID. I had my college ID, which they said was not valid, my university ID. I found my consulate card, which they said in the state of Arizona that had been made illegal as a few years before. And so in the moment, my panic was like, oh, shoot, am I about to be deported because I called to ask for help? Um, because I had done a lot of Know My Rights and I had done courses, I knew that they had no right to ask me for my ID. So I finally, forced the question if they were going to take my report or not. They eventually took down the report. Nothing happened with that. But so many families, those situations of just calling, even when it's calling for help or calling because they're a witness, in Phoenix, Phoenix Police Department questions people for IDs. They don't have to. It's not the law to, but they do it. It's part of their practice. And so situations of domestic violence, um, situations of any really mental health, all the different type of crises that people call, could end up with a deportation. Phoenix Police works with ICE.
As do really almost all police departments.
And then they take people to MCSO, right, which used to be Sheriff Arpaio's jail. And Arpaio worked really closely with ICE. They have them located in the jail themselves. And that hasn't changed. Even though Arpaio is no longer in office, the new sheriff still has ICE within that office. So even when people are being taken for
wait, I thought getting rid of the racist one guy was gonna make all the difference in the world. We're supposed to. There was one racist guy, and that was. Are you telling me it's a systemic issue? Get out.
Yes, yes. Wow. Like we thought it was that one person, right? No, and definitely a systemic issue. And I think the leadership within the government like doesn't understand that they're an active role in these systems, right? That sheriff is actively deciding to keep ICE in there. He's a Democrat. He is, he's all these other things that are not our pile. Yet he still works, collaborates, and funnels people directly into ICE's hands. And so that is continuing
And
to happen.
from through ICE directly to the concentration camps.
Yes, then from ICE to that, and then deportation. So people, any interaction with police is yeah, it's a threat. And even when calling, when you call police into our neighborhoods, when we call, right, when we are asking for help, that is also what we're talking about, reducing calling, because them being in our neighborhood, they might go to show up to the party with the loud music, but now they're in our neighborhood and they're roaming our streets, and someone might look suspicious, and someone might, or maybe they need to meet a new quota, or maybe they need to make an arrest this week, and it happens in our neighborhoods. And so for all of those reasons, like, these conversations are critical in this moment. But for undocumented people, especially with the number 45 attacking families, attacking people, like doing raids in our communities, and we have a police union that has supported Trump. They wrote a letter in support of 45. They backed SB 1070, which was one of the most anti-immigrant laws in the country.
Just for folks that may not understand, can you explain SB 1070 a little?
Yeah, SB 1070 was a show me your papers law that stated that if you looked undocumented, and they said illegal, that you could be stopped and questioned. And
Can you define what look undocumented looks like for me?
yeah, well, it wasn't the blonde and blue eyed immigrants that are here, it wasn't them, right? And in Arizona, it looks like us. It's people of color. Um, it's in our neighborhoods, right? Like that, like their criteria of that is who they were targeting. And so that was became a law, and the police were some of the biggest supporters and advocates. And they were actually the police union leadership were very smiling and happy and smiling behind the governor at that moment when that bill was signed. So that's the leadership of the police, and that's the history of this police department. They've never been quiet about being anti-immigrant.
Um, yeah, so you have a situation where y'all have literal concentration camps out here, and you have folks stopping you and asking you for your papers. Um, and it's sure there are clear parallels to 1930s Germany, but at the same time, it shouldn't be about a debate of whether or not it's 1930s Germany. It doesn't matter. This happened in 1930s Germany, and you said never again. Like, okay, there are parallels. Do something. And even if you want to say it's not, okay, say it's not, but it's still terrible, right? So, what do you? It gets me riled up, obviously. But how does that make you feel when you have folks debating whether or not y'all, you know what I mean, immigrant folks have like access to basic human rights here is what we're talking about. Um, what I wonder, like, how that affects how you guys move in these spaces and deal with these basically Gestapo police. I really the closest that's the accurate term for it.
Yeah, it's scary, right? It's scary to think about people who basic humanity, like they just don't believe in humanity, who don't act in a humane way, and who don't believe that people, just for the fact of being people, deserve human to be treated with humanity and dignity, right? And like that, the idea that anything, your color of your skin, your status, that it's a 9-digit social security number, right, that automatically makes us less human, according to some folks. And so it is scary to be out there because we see it. We see how they act. We see, there's all this data of hate crimes going up in places where Trump had a rally, right, a campaign rally in the last few years. We've seen what happened in Charlottesville. Like, we've seen what this level of hate and what this level of just lack of humanity is physically doing, and what's actually being created in our community. And also there is, for us, this idea that this, like, that justice does bend one way, and that this is coming to an end, and this is like the end of like the white supremacy patriarchal things, like trying to grasp power in this way. And the hope in the young people, and hope in the mothers, and hope that, people who were here today, majority people of color, a lot of young people that are the new majority. And the more we politicize our people, the more we talk about these issues, the less they're going to be able to continue to do this. And ultimately, these young people are going to take positions of power. And I think that's what we have. We have the fear of all the folks who do believe that they are better than other humans for whatever reason. And we have a new generation that is saying, not anymore, right? And I think Puerto Rico is a perfect and beautiful example of that. It was a movement led by young people.
You're talking about where they got rid of the mayor of Puerto Rico by banging on the governor of Puerto Rico, rather, banging on the pots and pans and plates outside of the governor's mansion for, what was it, 2-3 days? They did that
over 11 days of mass protests, right? And young people were taking the streets, and with music and art and pots and pans and all of the reasons, saying we're done, like, we're not taking this anymore. And I think there is that moment that is happening in the United States, that people are saying, we're done, like, this can't happen anymore.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time. If there's one thing, like, you have the platform, if there's one thing you want to say to folks right now, that and just kind of tell your story of folks in Arizona, if there's one thing you could tell them about what resources you need or anything, this floor is yours.
Yeah. That we're fighting, right? Arizona has been ground zero in attack of immigrants, of young people, people of color. I want people to know that we are fighting, that we're not backing down, that this police department and policing overall, it cannot and will not continue as it has, and that we're committed to making sure that is true. We're committed to keeping our families together. We're committed to keeping our families safe. And as part of that is that we have to redefine safety. We have to do things differently. And we don't fully know exactly how that's going to look like, but we do know that it has to happen. And we're committed to disrupting what's going on, dismantling this unjust system, and really determining a new reality for our people. And so for people who are watching us, that you have resources, if you have expertise, you want to support in policy, you want to support with art, you want to support with whatever, technology, whatever it may be, it's welcomed, it's necessary, because we need to have this fight, and this is a fight for the long run.
Thank you so much.
Out front tonight, chaos at the White House. President Trump's deputy chief of staff, his communications director, is
just because of their connection to President Trump. And I know you've been saying...
We learned recently that Donald Trump threatened to sue his former schools if...
Tired of hearing about Trump 24/7? Become a member at statuscoup.com for only $10 a month. Click the notification. With your help, we can start the media revolution.
And before Bernie went on stage, I spoke with his supporters online here, and you really get that feeling from